we've seen a drop in IQs for the very first time in quite some time. Does this mean that all professional creatives will just disappear? Gordon Ramsay is not frightened by HelloFresh as a meal kit. So I think that AI will affect or impact the entertainment industry through 4Ds. Democratizing. The second one is diffusing, dimensionalizing, and finally the one that interests me the most is dismantling. The algorithms are essentially secret when they're serving up as entertainment. It's a bit like KFC's recipe.
Let me introduce you to today's guest. Not me introducing you to today's guest. This is sarcastic ChatGPT. Here we go.
All right, everybody, here comes Phil Rowley,
Head of Futures at OMG Futures, which sounds less like a job and more like something a tech bro invented at a retreat. Phil spent 25 years helping brands future-proof, which we all know means panicking slightly earlier. He's advised 50 major clients on anything buzzwordy, AI, gaming, sustainability, you name it. He's written over 20 reports on the future, because clearly the present was boring. He's globe-trotted with keynotes, making execs sweat about what's next. But let's not forget his crowning glory, that green swimming badge for 25 metres in 1987. So welcome the man paid to tell brands they're behind, Phil Rowley.
Or Phil Rowley, as it should be. So, hey, Phil, you got a green swimming badge for 25 meters. Congratulations!
I did. Yeah, and thanks very much. One of my proudest achievements, if I'm honest.
So, could you tell us a little bit about what you do? You're at OMG Media, which Omnicom Media Group.
Omnicom. Yeah, OM or short. Yeah, exactly. So my name is Phil Rowley. I'm head of futures at Omnicom, and I run the OM Futures department. So our job really is to get brands to the future faster, and that means, as your sarcastic ChatGPT hinted at, talking to companies and blue chip companies and global companies about what that looks like in media and marketing. But it's not just media and marketing. I suppose it's also about those big macro trends that are going to affect the consumer of tomorrow. And that could be anything from AI, sustainability, gaming, new technologies, emerging technologies, all of the above. And it's just making sure that we know when we're speaking to them that we don't talk about it in some kind of distant, intangible sci-fi future, that we want to talk about how to make it practical for their marketing and their campaigns and to help them to understand the consumer of the future. So ultimately, we do the wow, but we also want to talk to them about the how and the now. And that's essentially what we do.
Oh, that was very marketing. The wow, the how, and the now. I like it. And I know that's in a PowerPoint deck somewhere. So, Phil, you and I both are kind of immersed, I guess, in technology. And as soon as new technology comes along, we will dive into it. I'm sure that you've got a VR headset hanging around somewhere. I've got one in the other side of my room there. All that kind of stuff, But we are in that very slim early adopter number, the people who are going to prod at the latest stuff to see what happens. Do you think there is any risk that people like us have in getting too caught up in the hype when the reality doesn't necessarily catch up for a few years and then it's actually evolved into something different by then?
Well, it depends who the risk for whom would be my response to that. I suppose for the consumer, there is they might lose a little bit of money on an electronic goods that then goes with the waffle iron and the sandwich toaster into the cupboard under the stairs. But for brands, then obviously there's perhaps a bigger risk in investing advertising money in a platform which is not yet mature or not quite suitable for the objectives. So perhaps the risk for brands is perhaps slightly larger than for the consumer, but that means that all the more need for people that are going to, I suppose, cut through the crap and make sure that they make the right choices. I mean, we wrote a piece, to blow our own trumpet for a second, called Avoiding the Regretaverse, when everybody else was getting really excited about the metaverse, because we could see that this was perhaps slightly enlarged. It was, over, and there was a lot of overclaims happening, and we wanted to cut a path through all of that hype and find the truth of what that opportunity could afford. And I like to think that we did that, but we were extremely aware of that hype as it was happening.
Yeah, I've got to say, about 10 years ago, I was the host of the UK's VR festival, 2 years in a row. I think, or was it 3 years? Might have been three. Um, and so one of the things, I'd be hosting it, I'd be announcing people up on stage, I'd be interviewing them. And one of the things I was constantly asking is, is there, first of all, what is the business case for creating this kind of media? And then on the other side of it, what are the creative opportunities? Because money needs to come in someplace as well for that.
Yes,
And I could not find, out of any of them, out of any of these people who were at the forefront of VR at the time, anything that felt as if it was going to turn into a sustainable industry. Because one of the things they were saying that they were trying to crack was the social side of VR, being in a headset and being social. But actually, a headset is isolationary. And the humans that are around you can't interact with once you're strapped into your virtual bubble. So to me, that
absolutely.
it was actually obstructive, and they were trying to find these other ways of making it social. What were the issues that you had with VR? Come on,
I
get
suppose
your
the
boxing
issue
gloves
with
on.
right. So there was two. I'd say there were two issues with VR. First of all, I think is that when we talked about the M word, the metaverse, people confused the leaf for the branch for the tree, and the tree for the forest. Ultimately, VR was always ever going to be a small subset of gaming as an overall opportunity. Something which is worth 300 billion and has 3.3 billion players on Earth, many of whom are on mobile, and conflate VR with the metaverse sorry, the VR and the metaverse with all of gaming was an issue because it was an extremely small opportunity in the grand scheme of things. The reason why, the second point I want to make is that I think it's one of the most friction fueled media interactions that it's possible to get. If I decided I want to all of a sudden decide I'm going to go into, let's use a really outdated word, Dave, cyberspace, right? I want to, like the lawnmower man or Trump, showing my age, you want to dive into a virtual environment. I had to go upstairs, unbox the headset, plug it in, make sure it's charged, get it all set up, and also make sure that I'm not required. I can't be interrupted when I'm sort of in that zone. So it required real effort. And there was no in the way that you could just pick up the phone or turn on the TV or half listen to the radio or glance at a newspaper. These are things which have really, really quick entry points into starting the consumption of that media. VR was at the opposite end of that. Now, that's not to denigrate it as a media channel because, of course, it is incredible. However, it has real limitations and real drawbacks that I think were perhaps not considered as well as they might at the time, and hence why we are now talking about
Yeah.
VR. We are talking about again the toaster or the waffle iron or the rice cooker which goes under the cupboard.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I found that with my VR headset, and I've got to say, I detest everything Meta, but I've got the Quest 3, and it is
Hmm.
very, very good. But
Hmm.
where I have struggled is finding, as you're saying, the time, finding the moments that I could actually use it in a way that felt that I wasn't just shutting my family out, because you also
Right.
need the space to do it.
You need a room. You need a
Yeah.
room.
So I would find that the only time that I could do it is if my family weren't around, or if I woke up at 1 in the morning and had insomnia, and then I might, yeah, I'll go in there and play a couple of rounds of crazy golf
Yeah.
and go to bed again. And that was it. That I just couldn't find those moments. So not all technology is what it's cracked up to be, I guess.
That's right. I mean, I like to think of I suppose the theory is the best test of a technology is whether it scales or not, in my view. It's actually the people that use it that will tell you whether it has true usage. So, and the Chinese apparently they consider something an innovation only when it's scaled, and up until that point, they don't really talk about it in innovation. They talk about it as an invention, and it's the scaling which makes it officially, in their mind, an innovation. And I think there are so many technologies that failed to take off and spread, and they might have had a peak, but the surface area was not there. You remember the Segway scooter? I remember that was
Mm.
spoken about in terms of this was going to revolutionize travel. And of course, I think you'd be hard pushed to find a Segway scooter today because of the use case. When it actually got tested in the field, it was found wanting. And I think there are so many technologies like that even though in the laboratory they tick all the boxes, when they get out there into the big wide world and people actually decide how they're going to be used, when they're going to be used, and at what points they're going to be used and what they'll be used for, that is the truest test of whether a technology will scale. And some technologies will, and some technologies have not scaled.
So yeah, I think that there's even before the segue. You're younger than me, so you probably only
Are you sure?
were really young when the Sinclair C5
I
uh,
remember that.
came out, and it was kind of designed to be as dangerous and as stupid as possible. So it positioned it for people in the US. Google Sinclair C5, and you'll be able to see this thing that you sat in it, you reclined in it, and the battery wasn't long enough to actually sort of get you where you wanted to go. It had pedals, but it was so heavy to use that you wouldn't be able to actually pedal this thing. It had you at the same heights of exhausts, so you were breathing in the worst of the cars, and you were low to the ground, so cars couldn't see you. Yet you were expected to be on the road. It was
And
just
you could drive one at 15 or 16 legally as well. So you could have a 15-year-old in an electric reclining bicycle sharing a road with an articulated 17-ton lorry.
yeah. It was just madness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and your Chinese example there of their approach to this sort of invention and innovation is kind of like a phrase that I often use, sort of sums that up, is technology is the word we use for shit that doesn't work properly yet. And I
Lovely.
think I think that that's kind of where we are with a lot of this stuff, where it used to be that we had digital cameras. Now we just talk about it as a camera. There was
Mhm.
digital television. We just talk about it as television again. So the digital thing came in as this thing to say, hey, this is different, it's new. And then, yeah, it goes out. Do you think that that kind of thing is going to happen with AI? Because we've seen all of these people who are trying to start businesses that are all about AI this, AI that, when actually what they need to be doing is solving the problem. Will the AI bit just disappear and we get back to just proper companies again?
So, just to respond to that, I mean, the first sign that something is scaled properly is when a retronym is invented. So, in other words, for instance, for many years, an acoustic guitar was just a guitar. There was no such thing as an acoustic guitar until the electric guitar was invented. Then that's the guitar, and then the guitar became the acoustic guitar. So, when you have a retronym for something, that means that's probably a really good hallmark that a technology has reached maturity and is actually scaled properly. Secondly, when you talk about AI, there's a little bit of a bugbear of mine, which is that the term AI is so broad that
Yeah,
it's almost not meaningless, but it is certainly not helpful when when we're trying to calculate how it will scale, how it will be embedded in society, how it will change people's lives. I mean, technically, we could have an argument about it now, and you could rugby tackle me to the floor if you wanted, virtually. But I think that predictor text is a form of AI, whilst
yeah,
at the same time, the Deep Blue or the AlphaGo computer that beat Lisa Doll at the famous Go board game is also AI. And that is your spectrum. And when we talk about artificial intelligence, we don't have the vocabulary yet, or we don't use the words in that vocabulary, if it does exist, often enough in the right combinations to describe at what points on that spectrum we're referring to. And that's an issue because we don't know what is artificial, as in what's the level of artificiality, and we don't know what intelligence or level of intelligence of that artificiality is augmenting or improving or acting on. So the answer to the question is I don't know, because what is it that we're actually talking about? AI and predictor text is fully integrated, and we don't even think about predictor text or even
yeah.
call it predictor text anymore. But there may be other uses of AI where we're still calling it AI, or we're still talking about we're still talking about deep learning or machine learning in our conversation. Maybe, to use my first analogy, there will be a point where we have a retronym for the human-led intelligence. In other words, you will say, well, it was human intelligence that produced this, as opposed to saying AI. But I don't think we're at that point yet.
Yeah. Do you know, I actually take AI back even further. I take it back to the calculator because that was a form of applied intelligence that was being replaced or augmented using technology. But you can even take it further back and be analog with that. And you can take it to the beads on the sliders, to sort of do your arithmetic, and
Abacus.
abacus, yeah. And that in itself is, in many ways, it's a form of artificial intelligence because it's externalizing thinking. Um,
Possibly, the argument, so that one of the argument goes is the first ever machine was the watch. That was the perfect because ultimately, whilst you're talking about your abacus, it's an externalization of of a mental process.
yeah,
The difference between an abacus and a watch is self-regulating. So once you set it going, it understands that a minute is a minute and it moves across the face in accordance with the time. And it's
yeah.
many people think that a watch is the first machine or the first robot in some cases, which I know is an extremely liberal interpretation of the concept of the robot, but it's something that self-regulates and measures its environment without any human intervention once it's set on its objective, which is to measure time.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, automata came around within about a decade of the first proper mechanical watch. So yeah, it's funny that those things are very much intertwined. Now,
Yeah.
we were talking about entertainment, and you have done a report. I mean, you are just a report writing machine, it seems, Phil. You've done a report which was looking, in fact, I've got the report right here, and it's titled The Future of Entertainment with AI in Entertainment in the Era of AI. Now, I think there's a lot of the stuff that you've got in here goes beyond AI, but I think when we
Mm,
narrow it down to AI, one of the things that I like is that you've looked at this from different dimensions and you've split it up into quite neatly your 4Ds. I was wondering
mm.
if you could explain a little about those 4Ds.
Well, I'll take you through the 4Ds very quickly first, and then, Dave, you can direct the conversation as you wish to which one of those Ds that you want to pick up on, or which ones we investigate further. So I think that AI will affect or impact the entertainment industry through 4Ds, and the first one is democratizing, which is essentially the raising of the floor and the ceiling in our creative endeavors. The second one is diffusing, which is about how I think all content will be a liquid, a solid, and a gas simultaneously, metaphorically, meaning that a music can become text, text can become audio, audio can become visuals, visuals can become film at the flick of a switch. Dimensionalizing, which is this idea that I think that the grammar of gaming and the way that gaming has culturally intertwined with all culture now means that the idea of three-dimensionality in our communications will be something that alters the way that we perceive and interact with our information, thanks to the massive onslaught of the gaming industry. And finally, the one that interests me the most is dismantling and how AI in entertainment is acting almost as an amplification or an engine for emerging and non-Western economies to assert their creative credentials on the world stage, which will change the geopolitical center, I suppose, of the entertainment industry on planet Earth. Particularly pertinent at the moment, as some of those emerging nations like Saudi Arabia and China and Korea are using AI to power their output. And they're the 4D.
That's really interesting. Well, let's start with that last one there, because I think that when we're looking at how it can open up opportunities for
Mm,
across the world, let me bring in a comment here. Hello from India. As an illustrator, I'm really curious. Do you think AI will help us stop playing it safe or just give us more of the same? So, when we're talking about how it's dismantling it, is it
mhm.
necessarily going to dismantle in a way that leads to better output? Or we know that there is an issue with AI output that it does tend towards the same. So,
Oh,
what would your
so
take on this be?
my take on it is two things really, which is unfortunately within art and culture and historically within creative output, there is a lot of cliche, there is a lot of dross anyway. So the
Yeah.
idea that AI will contribute to a sort of cheapening or a degradation of quality is a debate that we should have in view not of the best stuff that exists, the Spielbergs and the Radioheads of this world. We should also take into account the appalling amounts of cliche that are out there within our communications industry. And as an ex-creative director, Dave, but obviously I'm sure that your work was at the absolute peak of
Oh, of
creativity.
course.
But goodness me, how much is out there that is copy and paste, Me Too, we've seen it before. It's full of it's derivative and it's copied
Yeah.
and it's emulation essentially. So in that regard, I think that AI is not something that is going to make anything any worse in my view. What it might do, however, is make, I suppose, the industrialization of the bland possible. However, there is still room for people with creativity and imagination and talent and skill to use it as an augmentation, to use it as a magnifier, to use it as something that powers up their skill that they currently possess. So the best way I can describe it, and I was asked this question recently where someone said, "Does this mean that all professional creatives will just disappear?" And I said, "Well, hang on a minute. Here's my analogy. Okay, you can get a meal kit delivered to your house from, let's say, HelloFresh or Gusto, which has all the ingredients, and you can make that and you can have a nice dinner. But Gordon Ramsay is not frightened by HelloFresh as a meal kit. He still has the talent, and he still has the nous, and he still has the innovation and the ability to make food in a restaurant that people still want to go to pay for to access the best quality that is possible due to his talent and his skill. And I think we need to think of it in those terms. Just because you have the gear, it doesn't mean you have an idea. So, in other words, you can have access to all of this democratizing technology, but it doesn't mean to say that you are now going to be a creative genius. Alternatively, if you are a creative genius, then I think that those AI capabilities could only boost and amplify and magnify that talent.
That's really interesting. Let's actually explore that a little bit further, because I think when we look at it's almost brings us back to your first D, democratization,
Right.
and I think that what used to happen in the creative industries, and this is somebody, I I worked as a session musician for a number of years in my 20s, and I've done filmmaking. I've been an advertising creative, been a writer. With all of these things, I've seen the communities that I used to work in railing against AI. And one of the reasons that they're doing that is that it would take years to become good at something. So to become a good musician, it took years, and you sacrificed parts of your life to
Mm,
be able to do the practice to get really good at something. The same with filmmakers, the same with writers. It takes time, it takes dedication. And I'm one of
yeah,
these weird people who puts in the time to do that kind of stuff,
yeah,
to try and
yeah,
get at least passable on
yeah.
things. Um, and what AI has done is completely dropped that bar so that anyone dropped it to the ground so that anyone can produce writing, music, video, images, ideas.
Mhm.
And what we've missed out is that when people are getting good at something, they're not just growing their skills, they're growing their judgment, they're growing their taste, all of these things that are really important. But when you drop the ability to do a task to the ground, people now no longer have taste and judgment. And that is one of the things that's led to slop. And I think the other thing is when we get to distribution, is that when we've got the algorithms that are feeding people this stuff, then that starts to become, if you can play the algorithm game and you're producing slop, that then just becomes part of this tsunami. What would your take on that be? That's my opinionated
I'd
take.
say it depends on what content that you want and that you're looking for. So if we take two examples, so there was a band that was released on Spotify, and you might be able to remember, was it called Velvet Sundown or Velvet Sunset or
Yes.
something?
Yeah.
That was this sort of breezy East Coast Californian rock. Turned out that it was completely AI. Okay, but when you listen to it, it's extremely derivative. It's very, very bland. And there's no heft or weight or seriousness to it. Okay. Now, I think that that music was probably listened to, and this is an assumption, so you can challenge me on this, almost passively. It's something that's on in the background. It's a distraction. It's something that is going on whilst you're doing something else, like AM radio, to quote a really old form of media, or just middle of the road pop radio. But if you take another example at the other end of the scale, so a band around from my neck of the woods like Sleaford Mods, okay? These are angry East Midlanders that rant and rave against a computerized backdrop about the injustices of, I suppose, the welfare state and a politically corrupt society. I don't think that AI, not only is it not going to be able to replace them because it's about the delivery and it's about the anger and it's about the personality, but also I don't think that people would want to listen to a computerized version of the Sleaford mod. And the same as I wouldn't want to listen to a computerized AI version of Rage Against the Machine or the band of the moment. I'm sure you've been following them as well. Angine de Poitrine as well
Oh,
came from
yes.
absolutely left field, absolutely nowhere, absolutely crazy, right? People are watching them because they are not AI, and
Yeah.
that's how they develop their taste. I think, in answer to your question, what it does is it puts a marker between that which is distraction and that which is engaging. You know, you sit and you listen to certain styles of music, and other music is on in the background. And all hail this side. But this side has always existed, Dave. Stock Aitken and Waterman hits from the 80s. You know, bland cover versions by pop stars that are pop acts that have just been put together by some impresario or guru. We've always had that shit. And we always have the quality. And the taste making that you're talking about is up for everybody to sort amongst themselves. I don't think AI changes that. It just magnifies the amount that's out there, but people can still find the quality if they're looking for genuine human interaction.
I totally agree. I'd very often say that 95% of anything is shit, which really is terrifying when I'm about to be doing so much flying over the next few weeks. Yeah, you don't want to think of 95% of pilots being bad. But
No, I think there's a minimum threshold there. I mean, it's
yeah,
95% above a minimum threshold, I would hope.
yeah, you'd hope that maybe 95% of people who want to be pilots are absolutely awful, but only the
Maybe,
5% get through.
maybe.
That's my hope. Or dentists. I think that some dentists are pretty bad. Um, so I say that with my British teeth. But with this, I mean, I love the fact that there's bands like Angine de Poitrine that I think that they're doing something that it feels as if it's a reaction against the sameness of AI generated music or whatever we've got at the moment. But they were doing this 5 years ago. It's just only now that they've been discovered. So what they were reacting against then was actually about human mediocrity, not about AI generated mediocrity. But it excites me when people will express themselves creatively as a reaction to what's going on and try to be different so that if everything's going in this direction, let's go off in that direction because
Right, but can't we always argue that all counter or all music that's exciting, like punk, for instance, is a
yeah,
reaction to the bell curve, trying to get out of the rut and of the cliche. So that I think that spirit exists in us all. But it's not just about breaking cliche. I mean, that first D for democratization is about raising the floor, but it's also about helping people that are perhaps not creatively gifted, realizing an idea that they've had that they can't necessarily express in a creative manner. So there's a guy out there called let me get his name right, Isaac Arthur, who is a sci-fi futurist guru. Who is, talks about on his YouTube channel about floating space settlements, colonization of Mars, really big ideas like populating the galaxy with artificial intelligence and robots. And when he first started out, I hope he won't find this too insulting. The content that he made, even though the ideas were amazing, he had a series of very, very low quality JPEGs as the visuals on his YouTube video. We would just slap them in, and sometimes they would have the watermark on them where he'd take them off the internet, and sometimes they'd be low resolution. Now, his amazing ideas and all of that thinking can be illustrated properly by using, say, like a Gen AI package to actually bring to life the things that he could see in his head that he couldn't do before, not because he wasn't able, just because he didn't have the technical creative job, as many of us do not. So, yes, we have to be careful that it doesn't replace a professionalized creativity, and I hope I've argued that it won't, but it also enables those people who do have a voice, who do want have great ideas and visualize those ideas like they couldn't before. So it's not only a raising of the ceiling, it's a raising of the floor as well.
yeah. And I think that almost sort of answers this question here for Leonard. In entertainment, it's double-edged sword, opens doors for incredible efficiency, but how do we ensure the human soul and unpredictable creativity of art doesn't get lost in the algorithms, I think that's completely down to humans.
Mm.
And there's humans who are just going to take and accept and distribute without adding any real humanity to it. And then
Yeah.
there's the humans who are going to react against everything that's out there. And maybe they will use AI in part of that process, or maybe they won't. But
Mm.
regardless, AI has become an impetus to put them in that direction.
Agree, agree. And again, it's that's exactly right. I think that it does help the distribution. There's no doubt about that. That's that second D actually diffusing, where we
Yeah.
get. I think you can come up with a technology now which will take what we say and transcribe it. So in other words, it turns audio into text. You can also find programs that will take a still image and animate it and turn it into a film. So in other words, this tsunami of content that we've been dealing with over the last, I'd say, 30 years since the internet was invented is going to get even bigger. If you can imagine a universe that's already infinite, expanding yet further, the amount of content that's out there will get bigger because every piece of content can exist as a solid and a liquid and a gas at the same time. It can move between the membranes of formats. But that also means that we need those same algorithms to bring to us the content that serves us best and the stuff that we'd be most interested in. And I think the counter to all of that content that will be out there, whether it has soul or whether it is soulless, is making sure that AI does the second job, this other job, which is to bring us the right content. Now, I'm old enough to remember when I would go into HMV and you would go to the CD section and it would simply be rock, pop, classical, opera, and then if you were lucky, maybe something like folk. And if you went looking for Portishead, you wouldn't know exactly where you were going to look because it was literally there were the categorizations. But now on Spotify, thanks to the way that it understands music and can split it, you can get genres like chat pop, which is hip hop delivered in a posh English accent. Essentially, you look like the kind of guy that would dig that, Dave. Wizard rock, math rock, pirate rock. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds amazing because AI understands the beats and the time signatures and the rhythms and the instruments used and what people like. And it can start designating these micro genres that people will be interested in beyond that brute force rock, pop, or opera. So, because of this amazing amount of content out there, the algorithm also owes us a much more refined, shall we say, refined recommendations back to us because of the intricacies and the subtleties of our palette. That's what that second D is.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've been finding, we've had AI for years and years giving us recommendations through YouTube, through Amazon, through Netflix, whatever it's been. AI algorithms that have been going, oh, if you like this, you must like this
Look
because
like
data
that.
shows
Yeah.
that other people do. So I personally find that from time to time, I have to make a very conscious effort to break out of the bubble that I've been constrained in by the
Mm.
algorithms.
Mhm.
Because I find that, I'll get into woodworking and I will get YouTube will just constantly be giving me woodworking videos.
Yeah.
On LinkedIn, I am inundated with AI stuff. And I know that other people don't have nearly as much AI stuff in their feed, the lucky swines. And
Mm.
it's we get caught in these bubbles, and then people imagine that everyone in the world is seeing the same stuff as they are.
Mhm.
Um, my wife is Caribbean, and she will talk about uh, Haitian TikTok. So because her family are Haitian, she gets all these TikTok videos from people in Haiti,
Yeah.
and that's we get caught in these bubbles and we think that it's normal.
Mhm.
Is that an issue? Is that constraining people? Is that narrowing people's brains? Because there was a study that came out in January or February of this year that shows that this is the first generation that appear to be dumber than the generation before.
The Flynn effect, isn't it? It's actually reversed. We've seen a drop in IQs for the very first time
Yeah,
in quite some time. After from 1700 to today, essentially IQ has done this, and then right at the end, it's just sort of just slightly tipped over
yeah.
the edge. Which is I agree that it would worry me if we are also ensconced within our enclaves, is that we don't get any outside influence. I mean, I like to think, and I don't know because the algorithms are essentially secret when they're serving up as entertainment. It's a bit like, KFC's recipe. You never really quite know what's going on. Is that there should be, and you can tell me if this is true or not, a random element in that long string of algebra that brings you something that you've never seen before or ever heard before, just on the off chance that you might like it, for the very reasons that you've just stated. Another, it brings us out of our area of interest and shows us something new. I think as consumers, we're always looking for something new, even from sort of the 17th century, where England became obsessed with the Enlightenment, all the way through to America being obsessed with pop bands from England in the 60s, and to Japanese manga that the West all of a sudden became obsessed with in the 1980s. We're always really interested in things that are outside our sphere of influence. Probably why Angine de Poiting was so has gone so stellar is because people are just looking at it going, "What the heck is this?" And therefore, I think, yeah, algorithms should, if they don't, have some kind of inbuilt obligation to bring us things which sometimes sit outside the the sphere of our interests, just in case we like it for the first time and become a fan of it. I think I understand why the algorithm moves so quickly. So if you're interested in video X and all of a sudden all you see is ads for X, we get why that is, because these companies are geared towards making a profit, and you monetize your content by making
Yeah.
sure you show people ads that they're interested in. Why would I want to be shown ads for a holiday where I don't want to go, or cat food when I don't even own a cat? I get that, but at the same time, I like to think that I might see a piece of content that's outside my sphere of interest, just in case it sparks my interest.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be nice to get that. Let's talk about the future of AI and entertainment. There was a Little Britain sketch that I used to laugh at a few years ago, and um, David Williams goes into a video shop and he says, "I'd like. Have you got a film that's got Tom Cruise is the leading man with Meryl Streep, and they are ballet dancers who solve crimes in Belgium?" And it's like, no, I don't think that film exists yet. And then he just ends with the line, "I'll wait,"
Yeah,
and he
yeah,
just
that's
stands there in the
that's a little
shop.
bit, yeah, yeah. Have you got a picture of
And
the disappointed horse? Yes, I know that's it. Yeah.
so it feels as if we're almost at this place. There's this little bit of a promise that maybe if you want that, the AI will create it for you on the fly. Are we heading in that direction? What other things have you seen that are sort of interesting potential futures?
Again, it goes back to my sort of my AI slot versus, or should we say, music slot versus sleep at Mob's point, which is, what do we actually want from our entertainment? I mean, in theory, of course, somebody could sit at home and make. There's a video doing the rounds. I think it's Steed Dance video where it's Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise in a bit of a punch up. But nobody, and everybody went, "Is this the end of Hollywood?" But nobody spoke about the fact that that was almost like a showcase piece. It was only maybe 1 to 2 minutes long and was simply demonstrating the technology. But would that fit into a larger narrative? Would you be interested in watching 2 hours of this, knowing that they weren't the real people? Would you be interested in the social media feed that you
Mm.
knew contained no posts from any real people? No, I think that we want human to human interaction. We want human to human connection. And of course, that AI can perhaps augment the storytelling. And of course, there are plenty of examples where AI is used in filmmaking already, from things like bringing the directors early shot choices for them to select from using their
Yeah.
own eye, or even something like pre-visualizing a scene by giving it the prompt from the script and saying, well, how would you shoot the scene? But ultimately, it's the director that makes the choice, and ultimately, it's the actors that make the choice. So I still think, I hope, that we are in an era where AI is an augmentation, not a replacement, because we want to actually have stories that connect at a human level. Now, if you were making a flashbang wallop video that was purely for spectacle, that it was a piece that accompanied, let's say, it was a music video, or it was accompanying something where it wasn't about human connection, it was just about razzmatazz and explosions, then of course AI could be potentially used for that. But I think ultimately we go to the cinema and we sit down to watch humans interacting with humans. And in that regard, I'm hoping that humans will continue to maintain their primacy within that relationship.
Yes, come on, humans, we're rooting for you. Phil, this has been great. I know that we need to start wrapping this up now. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts on this. I there's so much more to talk about here. We've barely scratched the surface of this.
Mm.
I think it's such a fascinating area as somebody who has had like one foot in the entertainment industry sort of through most of my career. It's to me, I've been fascinated to see how these different industries have been responding to it. And part of the misunderstanding, I think, is people are thinking that it's either human or AI, but where it's best is when the human and the AI comes together. And as you're saying, sort of augmenting people and using AI to help you tell stories or produce a great piece of something. Yeah, oh,
Absolutely.
there's so much. I think we've got more chatting to do here.
Probably we should do a part 2. We didn't even get to the dismantling part as well, which is the most interesting. This idea that, that we're seeing Saudi Arabia invest loads and loads of hard-earned cash into film studios, into sporting events, and the biggest sovereign investment into AI. Again, to use AI to make a statement on the world stage about its, I suppose, its readiness to be a to culturally export its values. Same goes with China. Same goes with emerging nations. The idea that everybody has an AI in their smartphone as the prices of smartphone come down. It's that democratization argument, but on a global scale. That traditionally, the Hollywood has been the beacon of values for the entertainment industry might shift. And I think that
Mhm.
idea of a multipolar cultural world, thanks to AI empowering storytelling in emerging nations, and a wave that moves from east to west, I think that we will see some big change over the next 10 to 15 years in terms of the style, the quality, and the intent of the output that we consume.
Oh, we definitely need a part 2 because that's definitely worth talking about. I love that. Fantastic. Phil, thank you so much again. We will get that part 2 sorted out in the next few weeks. And yeah, thank you everyone who's joined us today. If there's anyone that you think we should be chatting to on the show, then please let us know. And that's it for this week. Toodles, y'all.